Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Toku Toy Theory, where I take a look at toys from various tokusatsu series and try to figure out why they look and act the way they do. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at what I'm going to call the evolution of Kamen Rider Chaser. And remember that word, evolution, keep that in mind, as that will play a big part later on. So, I'll be taking a look at the three forms that this character took over the course of the series, and because of that, this might be a little bit more lengthy than others, but it is significant that I do it at this point, since the character did appear earlier on than what might seem like the next progression in this series, or sub-series of Toku Toy Theory. Because he was there from early on, even though he went on to use a later rider system. But, without further ado, let's begin. To start, we'll look at Kamen Rider Chaser's origins, which is also the origin of the drive system, by looking at the very first shift car created, which was Shift Speed Prototype. As implied, this is the prototype to Shift Speed, and the prototype to all shift cars in general. You can tell that this is a bit incomplete, as indicated by the circuitry that's still visible on it, as well as the missing spoiler in the back. It's also got a much darker color scheme, which is quite different, and of course would naturally be since this is the prototype. That being said, even with the prototype, from the beginning, drive symbol had already been established. This in turn led to the creation of Kamen Rider Pro Drive. And, if it wasn't obvious from the shift card used and the appearance, this is the prototype of Drive Type Speed. It does have a color scheme matching the Shift Speed prototype, but also with a couple of cosmetic differences, or rather system differences. Similar to the shift car, he does not yet have his trademark spoiler. He also has the cybernetics, or circuitry, running across the top of his head. He's also missing a tire, or shift tire, as that had not yet been established, or that system was not yet in place. Instead, he's equipped with the archetype gear, which is basically a placeholder for the shift tires in general. And you can see that very much matches up with all of the piping and gears, or basically all of the underbody details on the back of the suit. But besides that, it is pretty simply just the early version of Shift Speed. And this was not too much of a problem character, more so of a background character, since the events that he took place in happened before the start of the series, and so that would lead into the form that we originally came to know him as. So, during the events of the first global freeze, Kamen Rider Pro Drive, who was really the original prototype Roimude known as Pro Zero, was defeated and captured by the Roimudes, who converted him into a weapon of their own, and he was equipped with the brake gunner instead of the drive system. So the brake gunner is an interesting weapon, as it's this kind of cobbled together mishmash of a gun and a knuckle duster, or a brass knuckle. And you can see, while it does have some smooth details to it, especially along the front and top, we can see the first glimpse of the aesthetic for the next form of Chaser. You also see it has a lot of undercarriage or body details, which kind of shows that this is not completely fully built, or was roughly made, as it doesn't have a covering for all of its parts. But This is also where we can see how they, or what they did to Proto Drive, which was that they basically reverse engineered the drive system and then turned it into something else. Now, the activation phrase for this item is pretty interesting, as it says, break your body. Now, that might seem to imply that it's telling the user to break their body, but it more relates to the purpose that this was used for when used to transform, in that its user was meant to basically break down or kind of be an enforcer on Roimudes who didn't obey the higher order. And as implied by the design, this has two different modes of functionality. The first is break mode, where it's used for enhanced punches. The second is gun mode, where it's used as a small gun. Though the third part of the functionality is activating the transformation into the next form of Chaser. This allowed the reborn Chase to transform into Mashin Chaser. Now, the name is something very interesting because it can be looked at in a couple of different ways. At face value, the name Mashin Chaser, or at least the Mashin part, could be seen as a pun on either the English word machine or the Japanese word Majin, meaning demon man. But it does get a little bit more interesting if you take a look at the kanji. Now, Mashin is not an actual Japanese word, but one created for this character. And the characters used roughly translate to demon advancement. Now, that might sound like kind of a nonsense word, but if you think about it a bit more, there may actually be a little bit of reasoning to it. As what was done to him and what led to his creation was, in a way, the advancement of Pro Drive, or Pro Zero, but at the same time corrupting him and turning him evil. Now, similar to the breakdown itself, Mashin Chaser has a very patchwork sort of look to him. You can see just from the top, that appears to be cobbled together with various scrap car parts or machine parts in general. So he has what looks to be parts of an engine on his head and shoulder, as well as on half of his mouth plate. And while it might not look like it, he does indeed have two eyes. The one is covered behind this covering, this kind of vented visor, as well as some rough antennas sticking out of the sides. You can see he has all these random pipes sticking out from all sorts of different places all over his body, as well as some very asymmetrical armor. You can again see the symbol from the brake gunner on his left shoulder, which is that of a skull and skeletal wings, which is meant to represent his status as the god of death or Grim Reaper. Basically, an ominous figure to be feared by the other Roimudes, for if they stood out of line, he would come and destroy them, only to reformat them as a way of teaching them a lesson. You can see he doesn't really have much at all that resembles his previous self. And in a way, he's perhaps the Roimude's more corrupted and more rough take on what the full version of him was meant to be. At the same time, they also wiped his memory so that he had no clue of who he originally was. Now, one interesting thing to know about him is this big port on the back. And this is for the new system they created for Mashin Chaser, involving this part called E-Circular, which attaches onto his back. Then, using special cars can be used for additional weaponry. In addition to reverse engineering the drive system, the Roymudes also created the Chaser viral cores for Mashin Chaser to use, which were enhanced versions of their own viral cores that they use themselves. The first of these is the Chaser Spider viral core. We can see is this very spider-like car with a large metallic spider on top as well as web details throughout. And these ones did not have the same kind of shift lever functionality as the shift cars, as they were designed to simply be the cores of the Roymudes. And they were designed, or their designs indicated the three different types of Roymudes existed, at least at the base level. And so these would be used alongside the brake gunner to tune Mashin Chaser. This equips Mashin Chaser with the first of the E-Circular's weapons, the Fang Spidey. A large pair of spider fangs that can be used for melee attacks and general close-range combat. As you can see, even the parts of the E-Circular look pretty patchwork, but they do give off the rather skeletal wing look of his own symbol. Though you can see that these are parts for another mode, whereas the main part used for this mode are these spider-like claws. Next, we have the Chaser Cobra viral core. For all of these, they have the same silver and gray color scheme, giving them a sense of unity, though for each they have different colored windshields. For Spider it was yellow, for Cobra it's red, and once again you can see the animalistic qualities here, with this large cobra having its head here on the front and then wrapping its entire body all around the back. This gives Mashin Chaser the second of the E-Circular's weapons, the Tail Whipper. So for this one, extends out this coil-like part designed to look like a cobra's tail. This one is obviously used for mid-range combat. And lastly, we have the Chaser Bat viral core. Once again, same color scheme, but this time the windshields are purple in color. And this is perhaps the most dynamic of the three. As you can see, this is a very large bat up here on the front, but then the body goes back like this, and unlike the other two, instead of wrapping around the car, the wings of the bat instead jut outwards like so. And this gives Mashin Chaser the third of the E-Circular's weapons, the Wing Sniper. However, this it outstretches these two pair of bat wings and turns it into a long-range weapon, allowing him to fire laser arrows as opponents. Additionally, later down the line, Mashin Chaser was upgraded to allow him to triple tune his three weapons together to create the Dead Liberator, his most powerful weapon. Though this is mostly used for ranged combat, this did give him aspects of all three of the different E-Circular weapons on their own. And if needed, Mashin Chaser could extend out the Wing Sniper's wings while the E-Circular was on its back, in order to give him flight, and that also gave him the image of something of an angel of death. And the final part of Mashin Chaser is his vehicle, the Ride Chaser. This is interesting in that this is once again another part of the transformation from Proto Drive, in that this was not an original creation, but rather transformed form of a prototype motorcycle that was designed for Proto Drive, while his vehicle, or what would be Drive's main vehicle, was still in development. And while the overall motorcycle form remained the same, the details changed quite a bit. Most prominent being the skull and wings on the front, as well as the purple flames throughout. You can still see that skull here on the back. And that gave an interesting dynamic to the series, wherein our main rider drove a car, whereas our rider-like villain character drove a motorcycle instead. But that also kind of hinted as to his past as a Kamen Rider. And so, as the series went on, Kamen Rider Drive eventually defeated Mashin Chaser. And while he had been defeated, he wasn't completely destroyed, and in his downtrodden state, he realized the error of his ways and eventually decided to repent for what he had done. And by doing so, once again became a Kamen Rider, this time using the next system. This gave him his signal bike, the Signal Chaser, designed after his own ride chaser. And we'll get a little bit more into the signal bikes in the next episode of Toku Toy Theory. And what really signified his return to being a rider was the rider symbol on the signal bike itself, though done up in a new color scheme. This was used along with the mock driver Hono for him to transform. Thus, upon first use of the mock driver and Signal Chaser, he transformed from Mashin Chaser into Kamen Rider Chaser. And with this, he cast off the rough and patchwork aesthetic of before for a new, sleeker look. You can see that starting with the helmet. It does appear as if he's cast off all the extra parts from his form as Mashin Chaser and gained a complete set of antennae. You now see his full mouthplate, as well as both of his eyes. As far as the body goes, it now has the appearance of a bluish-silver motorcycle bodysuit. And as you'll see in the later episode, this is somewhat part and parcel of the next system. Though you can see he still has some of his trademark purple running all across his body. And he still retains a little bit of his past as Mashin Chaser via having, yet again, that symbol on his left shoulder, yet he now gains the rider insignia on his chest as well. He additionally has a tower on his back, which is another part of the next system that he doesn't utilize as much as the original rider who uses the next system. And with this new form, he also gained a new weapon. That weapon being the Shingou Axe, a tall battle axe based off a traffic sign, or rather a crosswalk signal. As you can see by all the various details, it even says rider exclusive, meaning that only a rider can use this. It is an odd design, but it made sense later on when we found out that the human that was copied to create Chase was actually a traffic cop, and he put a big emphasis on following rules, especially traffic laws. So in a way, this was hinting at his origin, or at least the origin of his new form of Chase. And for this, it had a much simpler system, where it would simply announce his name upon activation. And the big feature of this, and big part of functionality, was actually behaving similar to a traffic signal. This could further be enhanced by equipping it with the Signal Chaser. That allowed him to have more powerful attacks. And activate his Hisatsu full throttle. And there we go. So, getting back to what I said in the beginning of the video, what I'd really say is the big overall theme of Kamen Rider Chaser's character is evolution. To where he started out primitive, being the prototype to Kamen Rider Drive, who was overall unfinished. He was later forced to evolve into Mashin Chaser, but it wasn't a properly done evolution, as he was very patchwork and he was also corrupted. Then later, when he redeemed himself, he properly evolved and came into his own as Kamen Rider Chaser, and he's the only character in the series to use the drive system, viral system, and next system at different points in time. And you can see there are quite a lot of differences between the three that he highlights. Additionally, while I gave you guys a bit of a preview of the next system, even though he used it after the first rider to use that system and that belt, it was necessary to give you the full breadth of his character, as well as to lead into an interaction between him and the first rider that uses the next system. And that's something that we'll look at in the next episode. But overall, this makes him a very complex character, and it's a very fitting theme for him, seeing as he is the original Roy-Mute, and the big goal of the Roy-Mutes in general was to evolve and become greater than what they were. So, next time I'll be reviewing the EZW Decidui, Primarina, and Incineroar. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and if you're new and would like to see more, please subscribe. And for now, this is KRX50, writing off.